All right, today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about how to write a VSP. And the first part of that is, what is a VSP? VSP stands for very short paper. I know, I'm super creative. These are small arguments that you write on a page to a page and a half. Is about how much room it takes up. One paragraph, okay? So, I'm very specific about what I'm looking for in the VSP, which is why we have this video, so that we can go through exactly what my expectations are, okay? You're going to have to complete 7 of these. So, for your VSPs, you will always be comparing the novel to the film, the most recent pairing, all right? So your first VSP will be on The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fist Fight in Heaven, and Smoke Signals. So, in your VSP, you will develop an argument about your interpretation that compares these two pieces, okay? And let's work through what a VSP is, because there are actually specific components that I'm looking for, specific sentences in some instance. So the very first sentence of your VSP, you're going to introduce the broad subject of your paper. So for The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fist Fight in Heaven, and Smoke Signals, your introductory sentence might be something like, in Native American fiction, the authenticity of voice can make or break a piece of fiction. Okay, so this is kind of broad. I'm talking about, I'm introducing my subject. My subject is, I'm going to talk about the authenticity of the Native American voice. Okay, so I'm just sort of broadly, I'm not getting specific. In the next sentence, okay, is where you will get specific. In your second sentence of your VSP, you need to introduce the titles and authors of the pieces you will be discussing, authors, directors. So, my second sentence would be something like, in Sherman Alexie's The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fist Fight in Heaven, and Chris Ayers' Smoke Signals, the authenticity of the Native American voice provides a unique perspective on the subject of these pieces of fiction. I probably have to clean that sentence up a little bit. But I give, right, these are the 2 pieces I'm going to be talking about. Please notice that the first time that you introduce a title and an author, you use full title, full name, okay? Subsequent mentions of title and author, so you can shorten The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fist Fight in Heaven to just Lone Ranger. That's fine. Please don't use like short abbreviations, like an acronym. Don't just take the first letter from each word. Just don't do that. Just shorten it to a couple of words. And always refer to authors by their last names, not their first. Okay, so your third sentence is going to be your thesis statement. By comparing the character development of Arnold Joseph in Alexie's novel to Ayers' film, it is clear that alcoholism is a significant problem in the Native American community as described by Sherman Alexie. Bam. Okay. Notice I'm specific. Alexie is not talking about all Native Americans or Indians, as he would refer to himself and to other indigenous peoples. He is specifically talking about, and this film and this novel are specifically talking about his reservation, his tribe, and their very specific, their issues, right? So specifically Spokane, specifically Coeur d'Alene, and specifically that res, frankly. I mean, like, it's that specific. So the next sentence will be a quote from the novel. okay? Some quote. Pick a quote, any quote that you can then discuss to elaborate on your point, okay? So you find a quote that describes Arnold Joseph and his relationship with alcohol, okay? You give the quote with the appropriate in-text citation, which would be Alexi's last name and the page number on which the quote appears. Then you will give an analysis of this quote. Analysis needs to be 2 to 3 times longer than the quote itself. That's just a good way to sort of visually gauge if you've spent enough time talking about this. An analysis is going to consist of 3 basic parts, right? So in a comparison piece, these parts are going to be kind of spread out. But after each quote, okay, after each piece of evidence, because for the film it might be different, we're going to talk about that in a second, but after each piece of evidence, you will, 1, explain what the quote means, okay? If the quote says, Arnold Joseph couldn't go to sleep without 6 beers, explain why that indicates that he has a very heavy drinking problem. I know it feels like that's obvious, but the thing is, when you read something and I read something, we come to the text with 2 completely different backgrounds, 2 completely different sets of experiences, and 2 completely different interpretations is what we will walk away from. And the purpose of analysis is to explain to me in detail what your thought process is, okay? It is to take me through your logic step by step, okay? And so that I can make sure that I am understanding how you are interpreting this quote. Now, please don't write the phrase, the quote means, because that's boring writing. And also, I mean, you're making a definitive statement that you probably can't prove. The whole point of your argument is to prove your statement. So, so what does the quote mean? That's the first part. How do you know that's what it means? That's the second part, and that's very important because this is where your logic comes into play. This is where you really explain to me, like, this is how we get here. So what does it mean is the end piece, okay? That's what your interpretation is. How do you know is you taking me through your logic step by step, okay? And that includes things like, you know, the use of certain words in the example that I gave, like a 6-pack is a lot of beer. You can talk about how the consumption of 6 beers before bed is not typical behavior, right? You can talk about that. Avoid universal statements. Avoid words like obviously. Avoid phrases like everyone knows, okay? Just explain to me how you know, right? 6 beers represents a large consumption of alcohol before bed, while this seems, and then maybe just, you know, maybe don't even talk about the rest of the world. Maybe just say, it represents a large quantity of alcohol, and Arnold Joseph is consuming large quantities of alcohol on a regular basis, which indicates that his relationship with alcohol is not healthy, that he is abusing alcohol, and, I mean, arguably abusing himself as well. That's, I think, the so what of my argument here. Okay. I said there were 3 parts. You're going to pause on part 3. Okay. Then you're going to give me a piece of evidence from the film, okay? Now, evidence from the film could be a quote, or it could be an extremely detailed description of a scene or an image from the film, okay? And I mean extremely detailed. The actor appears to be over 6 feet, wears his hair very close cut, is wearing a red shirt that is faded and untucked from blue jeans that are ripped. The character is wearing, but like, I want detail. And the reason for this is I need to be able to imagine exactly what it is you are referring to. so that I can see if your interpretation is valid, right? If the evidence that you're providing actually does what you say it does. So then, after that piece of evidence, you're going to tell me what it means. Tell me how you know. Please, when you're talking about the film, engage in the language of film craft. Talk about setting, talk about scene design, talk about costuming, talk about lighting, talk about camera angles, talk about editing cuts. Really use the language, the vocabulary, and concepts from the Brows Held High videos in your discussion of the films, okay? And then here's the third part of your analysis. You are going to talk about how these two pieces of evidence and all of this analysis that you've given me, how that relates to your argument. By looking at the description of Arnold Joseph and his interaction with alcohol in the novel and his physical representation on film, it is clear that let's see, what is it clear that? By looking at the representations of Arnold Joseph's relationship with alcohol in the novel and film, it is possible to identify a theme of alcohol abuse and how it negatively impacts the lives of Native Americans in the fiction of Sherman Alexie. There we go. Arnold Joseph represents a larger theme. That theme is alcohol abuse within this community. Ba-bam. So I tie it back. I restate my thesis. Okay? You got to tell me what it is we're arguing again. And then a closing statement. You know, Alexie's work indicates a larger conversation to be had about substance abuse within communities of Native Americans. Okay, so those are all of the pieces. The big thing here is make an argument, okay? Make sure you talk about both pieces. Don't summarize. Do not summarize the novel. Do not summarize the film. You have me as a reader, and that means you have what's known as a knowledgeable reader, and that doesn't mean that I know things. It means that I have read and watched the same thing that you have read and watched, so you don't need to summarize them for me. So avoid summary, no summary, no summary, okay? Just focus on creating a critical argument, a critical analysis based on interpretation of these two texts to say something about the fiction. These are going to be one paragraph, okay? One paragraph. Should take up about a page to a page and a half in the document. These are not terribly long. And the reason behind this is that these represent, in like a longer 3 to 5 page paper, this would represent one body paragraph, basically. And so it's a very small, it's a very limited argument, and it is meant to help you really be able to focus in on the literature and the films. You can't get a lot of breadth in a VSP. You can't talk about an entire novel in a VSP, or even an entire character in a VSP, but you can get great depth. So you can talk about a certain aspect of a character with a really nice detailed analysis, with a lot of depth, with a lot of thoughtful consideration in a page, page and a half. So that's sort of the purpose, is to look for depth in the discussion and to really focus in on your argument. If you have any questions at all, please email me at geraldine.pope@wnc.edu. You're going to have to do 7 of these, 1 for each film, okay? So I really encourage you to, if you have questions, to reach out, to ask. And, you know, And I will write a lot of feedback. Your rubric is very full. I encourage you to take a look at the rubric so that you can get a sense of exactly what I'm looking for. There's a point on there that's going to drive you crazy. It's the unique contribution point. Those points, for one, it is possible to get an A without getting the unique contribution points. So there's that. And the reason I do this is unique contribution is about going above and beyond. It's about exceptional depth in your analysis, in your interpretation. And you don't have to be right. But you do have to say something interesting. I like to say that it's better to be wrong in an interesting way than right in a boring one, because right in a boring way doesn't move us forward critically, but wrong in an interesting way can move us forward critically. Even if the thing you're saying isn't supported by the text, that doesn't mean that there might not be something there that we can really engage in, critically speaking. So that is what that point is about. You know, read the description in the rubric to see. There are a few different ways that you can go about getting that point. So, but you can get an A without the unique contribution point. So there's that as well. All right. Again, any questions? Geraldine.pope@wnc.edu, and we can work on it. All right, guys. Well, happy writing.